Good afternoon, Miamians. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. As part of the Alumni Association's webinar series, today we present Learning to Embrace Writing for Learning and Human Connection in the Age of AI. Joining us today is Dr. Elizabeth Wardle, the Roger and Joyce Howe Distinguished Professor of Written Communication at the Howe Center for Writing Excellence here on campus. Welcome to you, Elizabeth. Thank you for being here today. Just as a quick reminder for our live viewers, you can submit questions, comments, feedback throughout the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button under your video. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth to tell us how to maybe get a little old school.
Thank you, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here. We have an emergency alarm that goes off every Wednesday at noon, so it just started going off as soon as she turned this over to me. But it will be over shortly if you can hear it. It's pretty loud. So glad to be here. I am the director, as Molly said, of the Howe Center for Writing Excellence. And that is an endowed center here on campus that's committed to creating a culture of writing here on campus. I'm also a faculty member in the English department, and I am a writing scholar. I'm not a creative writer. I study how we use writing in our everyday lives and how to help people use writing more effectively. And so today, what I want to do is talk with you a little bit about some ideas from my new book, which is called Writing Rediscovered. And if you hang around till the end, then you'll get a code to redeem for a free copy for the first 50 people who try to redeem. This is the first book I've ever written that is for a broad audience, not for academics and not for students. And I'm really excited to share it with you. I can't see any of you here today, but I did get a sneak peek at the list of people who signed up, and I really am excited to welcome so many kinds of people today. I know we have some parents with us. I know we have some alumni, and I know that we also have some colleagues who study writing from around the country. And even one of my colleagues from India, I think, is here. So glad to have you all here and excited to talk with you about the role of writing in your life in an age of AI. So we will go ahead and get started then, if I can figure out how to use my screen. And the alarm is still going off. It will be finished shortly. So many parts of our writing lives, many parts of our life journey happen through some form of writing, whether that be our wedding vows, birthday cards, college applications, grocery lists, text messages to our friends, love letters, business plans, annual reports. All of these are forms of writing, from the humblest genres like grocery lists to the more formal and high-stakes genres like business plans or annual reports. All of these forms of writing get things done for us. And as writing scholars, the phrase that we use for that is writing mediates our activities. But many people have a very vexed relationship with writing. So you may remember your high school teacher's red pen, the 5-paragraph essay that you wrote in English, and your anxiety over high-stakes writing tests. You may remember memorizing rules that you then didn't get quite right, and hear voices in your head telling you that you're better at math, or asking why you didn't learn to write in your English classes. So for many people, writing is something that they would really just prefer to avoid. So for anxious writers, an AI tool like ChatGPT might feel like a godsend. After all, why wouldn't you want to get those writing tasks out of the way without the struggle? If a new tool can do the work for you, why wouldn't you take advantage? If AI can give you 10 new marketing slogans in 10 seconds or draft a contract for a client in 30 seconds, why wouldn't you let it? You could skip the replay of your high school English teacher's voice in your head, stop worrying about comma splices, and just let the technology take over. There is no doubt that AI will be and already is part of our writing lives going forward. But we lose very important things when we blindly embrace new writing tools, skip the composing process entirely, and run away from our bad experiences with writing. And one of the things that we lose is human connection. Do you remember the ad that Google ran during the Olympics? It was called Dear Sydney, and it suggested that kids should use AI to write a letter explaining their admiration for Olympians. Sports writer Shehan Jayaraja wrote that the pitch was really, hey, we can feel and express emotions so that your daughter doesn't have to. And there was a very strong public outcry against that ad. What surfaced in that moment was that writing connects us to people. And this connection is not something that we want to outsource to a computer. If we don't want AI to replace human connections and relationships and emotions, then we need to think very carefully about when and why we rely on AI tools. So when you face a writing task, large or small, ask yourself some questions. Who am I writing to? What connects with those audiences? What feels meaningful to them? Sometimes what connects us is actually imperfection. Consider the letter that your child might write to their Olympic hero. The misspellings and the awkward language are actually the thing that make writing meaningful. These illustrate that a breathing and evolving human being is behind the words and that those words are heartfelt. The polished and seemingly perfect sentences that AI produces, and I do note seemingly perfect sentences, are not what humans would write to another person with whom they have or want to have a connection. And telling AI to revise to sound more like an 8-year-old is just faking human connection. Another thing that we lose when we skip the writing process is learning. Learning is another important function of engaging in the process of writing. Writing is not about producing a product, or maybe it is not just about producing a product. What happens when you sit down to write something? A letter to an old friend, a marketing campaign, a white paper. Do you put your perfectly preformed thoughts down on the page exactly as they already are in your mind? Probably not. Instead, the act of trying to turn your ideas into written text is an act of learning. And as you force yourself to write sentences and sketch out thoughts, you find that your ideas change, your unclear thoughts become clearer, and one idea leads to another. So the act of engaging in writing is an act of thinking and learning. When we rely on AI tools to simply create a written product for us, we are not writing. We are producing a product that may or may not have meaning for other humans, and we're skipping the process of thinking and learning. So think of something you wrote recently, maybe a report at work, or an email to your boss, or a letter to your spouse. What happened in your brain when you went through the process of writing? For example, as you wrote the report to your boss, did you learn as you drafted? Did one idea lead you to a new one? Were you reminded of things you needed to include but had forgotten? Did you realize that you weren't actually sure what the impact of that one initiative was, or that you needed to follow through on some ideas that you had forgotten about? We lose something when we skip the part of writing that is drafting, thinking, and learning. If we just instruct an AI tool to write the report for us or email a friend an update about a project, we miss the opportunity to learn new things that will make us and our work and our relationships better. In other words, we're selling ourselves short. So let me show you what writing for learning and connection looks like in action. I am teaching a grant proposal writing class this semester. My students are juniors and seniors from all kinds of majors. They're working in teams with local nonprofits here around Oxford, with TOPS, which is a food pantry and social service agency, the Oxford Free Press, which is a very new local nonprofit newspaper, which is the new nonprofit newspaper, the Richard and Carol Cox Art Museum, which is here on campus, the Oxford Community Arts Center, and Nevertheless, which is an organization in Cincinnati that works with girls of color from underprivileged homes who've gotten into some kind of trouble. When I told someone in leadership recently about this class, she said, well, I guess you won't be teaching that class much longer since AI will just be writing our grant proposals for us. But let me paint you a picture of what's been happening in the class to help you see why I think that her assumption is wrong, and also to illustrate what it looks like to use writing to learn, connect, and get things done. At the beginning of the semester, the leaders of these 5 nonprofits visited our class and talked with the students about their work. The students researched the organizations in advance and wrote questions, and so they had a lot to say when the guests attended class. And in the process of this, they learned so many things. In the process of writing, they learned what the poverty line is for a family of 4 in the US right now. It's about $32,000. And that it doesn't matter where you live, whether LA or Oxford, if you make more than that, you don't qualify for assistance. And of course, because the group is working with our local food pantry, the students are watching in real time an explosion of hungry families in their community as federal benefits like food assistance have been cut off during the government shutdown. Last weekend, the number of families that TOPS served was double what it usually is. As they write, the students have learned what a news desert is and what the consequences are for communities who have no local news coverage. News coverage, for example, informing residents that there are currently plans for 2 giant data centers right here in Butler County, or informs them of who is running for office and what their positions are. As they write, the students have learned that there are very few arts opportunities for students in our rural district, and that 28% of families in our local school district live below the poverty line. As they write, the students have learned that nearly 2 million Ohioans have vision-robbing conditions, and museums are largely inaccessible to them. Could AI have found this information and written about it? Maybe, probably so. But I think, and my students agree, that the goal of doing something yourself is to learn and grow. And just having AI look up facts and summarize them completely skips the learning process. As the students have puzzled through the grant proposal drafts, they have not simply been thinking about sentences and grammatical construction. They've been thinking about really big and hard questions. For example, what is the value of having a local community arts center? And can that value be measured? Why is it important for museums to make their collections accessible to people with visual impairments via touch tours? How do you explain the challenges of living in a rural area without much public transportation and help a potential funder see the ways that this limits children's access to art, music, and theater opportunities? So what the students will produce, the final piece of writing, might look at first glance like something that AI could produce. But what is not visible is what happened to my students, what they learned, and how they grew as people in the process of researching, thinking, and drafting that eventually final product. The other element that's invisible, if you only think about writing as a final product, is what happens when people write together. The students in my class are writing in teams in a very structured way. They research individually, then combine their research and learn from each other. They each draft a section and then write a team draft of that section. So what's happening during this process is that they are learning. They're learning by reading each other's writing and seeing how someone else approached the ideas and the task. They're learning how to interact with other people. They're gaining empathy as their team members struggle with illness, personal challenges, and injuries. They are also having a really good time. I listen while they work in teams, and they are truly joyful. They laugh and connect and are human, and they told me to take this picture and share it with you today. So I did. Sometimes I wonder what people walking by my classroom think about all the laughing and the loud chattering that's going on. If you imagine or believe that writing is a solitary and silent act, you'd be pretty confused about what's happening. But here's what I know, and what other writing scholars know, and what my students demonstrate every single Tuesday and Thursday at 1:15. And that is writing is social, and writing is a means of learning and connecting. I suppose it is possible that we are hurtling toward a future where we design a college experience without any classes like this because AI can just do it. But why would we want that? What are we losing in the process? AI is the elephant in the room in any conversation about writing these days. And if you believe the hype, you might be tempted to believe that AI can do all your writing for you and that writing is something you just won't need to worry about, quote unquote, worry about going forward. But I encourage you to take a step back and do some critical thinking about that claim. Consider the ways that writing connects you to other people, helps you learn and think critically, and engages you in the process of developing as a person, a thinker, and a human in community. What happens if you ask AI to write your dating profile for you, which according to my students is something that is happening? Or if you ask AI to write the first text message reaching out to someone you were matched with on the dating profile, which is apparently also happening? What happens if you're in an argument with your partner or your spouse and ask AI to write them a letter or a text message? And then what happens if they use AI to write you back? All things that are happening. What happens when you decide that AI can write your funding proposal or draft a contract with a client that you don't bother to read before giving it to them? There is a lot to be said about the ways that AI hallucinates, makes things up, acts from bias, and how data centers that support AI are destroying our environment using water to cool servers and electricity to power them. All of these things are real problems, and if you're not familiar with them, I hope you will take some time to research them. But I am here today to ask you to consider what you lose as a person, as a thinker, as a learner, as a business person, as a partner, as a parent, when you skip the thinking that is an inherent part of any writing process. Are you willing to lose that? What happens to us as a society and culture when we choose to give that up? So how can we approach our relationship with writing and writing tools, and especially AI writing tools, proactively? I ask myself, my students, my staff at the Howe Center for Writing Excellence to make choices based on named values and an explicit set of guiding principles. And I'd like to share with you an activity I recently asked my students to do, and then invite you to engage in that activity yourself. My goal with my students is not to tell them what their relationship with AI and writing should be, but to get them to think critically and carefully about what they want it to be. So to do that, I have asked them to engage in some reflective writing about their own values and goals. So these are the questions that I asked them. First, to identify their primary values in life. Not a question I've ever asked my students before, but as you'll see in a minute, a very important question. And then how those values impact their values and goals for writing in different areas of their life, at school, at work, in their community, in their personal life. And then I asked them to think about what goals nonprofits and others writing grant proposals have for their writing. And then how in this class that they're taking, their values and goals relate to writing the proposal for their client. And then finally, how they would like their team to use or not use AI in these, and for what reasons. And they brought that back to their team. So the first question that I asked them about their overall values was incredibly important in this process. And the students answered so thoughtfully. They said things, for example, like, we value integrity, sustainability, learning, human creativity and collaboration, and critical thinking. And I would like to point out that I think that this set of values that they have named is so wildly different than the view of college students that you're seeing in the media. I think that the media perception of what our students are thinking about and what they care about is just really off base. Just a side note. So then we also talked quite a lot about conflicting values and demands and how they might think about what they valued more and what choices they would have to make. So they said, for example, things like, I value human creativity and collaboration more than I value the efficiency of AI, or I value the environment more than I value technological advancement that AI is promising. It was also really helpful for them to link their values with the goals of a particular task and context. I think it's very easy to imagine sort of a theoretically pure value, and then to recognize that in life, things aren't always so clear. So for example, they may be deeply concerned about the environment and intellectual property, but then find themselves working at a nonprofit that is seeing triple the number of hungry people than before, without the staff or the funds to feed them, and very little time to write a grant proposal. So in that case, is it ethical to use AI to support the grant writing process? The students were very clear, and have been clear all semester, that their goal in being in college in general, and in my class in particular, is to learn. And they are deeply disturbed by the idea of using AI and then skipping the learning now, even if they might use AI to assist in similar projects later when they have a better understanding of things that they're currently learning for the first time. They are also really well informed about data privacy, and they don't want to share information from their nonprofit clients with an AI system that has no respect for privacy or intellectual property. So here's an example of a statement that one of my students wrote that she said that I could share with you all today. She said, "My values are integrity, critical thinking, knowledge, learning, growth, and accountability, and that to prioritize those, she does not use generative AI in any schoolwork because the process of studying, writing, and research will impact her development. That she prioritizes the opportunity to expand her understanding of the world, challenge herself, and find interesting perspectives over any use of AI. That she holds herself accountable to the communities in which she lives, and she doesn't want to use AI in order to reduce risk to those communities, and that she seeks to protect the data privacy of the people that she works with." So again, and they were all like this. I mean, honestly, I could have brought any of the student statements and you would have found them to be so thoughtful, so careful, and so focused on learning and future consequence to today's decisions. And I do think it's not really the topic of my talk today, but I think it's important to recognize that the messages that you're getting about what college students are doing and thinking in the media is really, really off base. So what about you? I would ask you to consider doing a similar exercise yourself. What are your guiding values? And how do those impact your values and goals for writing in different areas of your life? And what do you most want to get from the activity and process, not just the product of writing in these different areas? And then where does AI fit? How does it align or conflict with your values and goals? And what intentional choices can you make about your AI use as a writer? So the beauty of naming your values and goals explicitly like this is that you don't have to be reactive going forward. You can be proactive and prepared and not slide into using a tool or engaging in a process that might actually conflict with your values and your goals. But if you're an anxious writer, you might find that your past feelings and experiences are getting in the way of your choices around writing. You might have values that lead you to want to use writing to connect, learn, and be in community. But you may also have absorbed some really bad ideas about writing, or you may hear voices in your head telling you that you can't write, or that you write too slowly, or that you make too many mistakes. And this is very, very common. So I invite you to try a few of the methods I share with my students. First, identify and talk back to the voices in your head that criticize your writing. If you're hearing your rule-obsessed AP English teacher, let that voice know they are not welcome here. And you can actively seek to replace that voice with a voice that encourages you to keep going and make meaning with words. Second, remind yourself that you can use writing for learning, and you can do this in a private sandbox, or you can get anything on the page and no one but you will see it. And there, your spelling errors and sentence fragments don't matter. You are simply writing to see what you learn and what you discover. If the idea of writing full paragraphs and formal prose increases your heart rate, then write in bullets, fragments, dialogue. For some of your writing, you can simply set a goal of learning and not worry about a polished product at all. And third, if you really struggle to get words on a page because you are afraid of making mistakes, you can change your tools and your environment. You can use pen and paper and free write without stopping. You can turn off your monitor and type as quickly as you can, because some people find that if they aren't seeing their words, they don't worry so much about mistakes. You can storyboard your ideas. You can talk into your phone's notes app and then use that as a first draft. There's a lot of things that you can do to get past your anxiety, but it's very, very helpful if you can remember that you're writing for learning, for connection, that the perfect final product is not the goal of what you're doing. So if you want to dive deeper, I would invite you to redeem this coupon for a free copy of my new book. Really, this is a book about ideas about writing, how to rethink what you're doing about writing, and it gives you some very, very specific strategies and tools that you can take advantage of as you're rethinking your relationship with writing. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Molly so that we can have a conversation.
Hi there, Liz.
Hi.
Thank you for that. I'm going to put your slide back up actually in just a moment so we can see that whilst we chat. There we go. All right. So Donna has a question for you. And this is mostly about your experience as a faculty member. She says that she's been reading about professors and faculty member using AI for their classes. And this is not specific to Miami, but around the country. What are your thoughts on that? Do you find that there are pitfalls? Is that helpful? What are your thoughts?
I think this is a very vexed question. I think that it really does depend on what your primary values and goals are. And so for me, I don't use it because I'm so deeply concerned about the impact of AI data centers on the environment. I don't think it's worth it to use it for class. However, I've seen faculty do some really interesting things with AI in order to design some really cool assignments and activities for their students. So I think that I think that faculty are using it, and I think there is a challenge. And, if you think back to that slide where my students were saying, I care about this, but I also care about that. I think that's the challenge here, is that if we have more students in our classes, if we have more students to teach, then the goal of efficiency might outweigh some of our other concerns. But I think that if we are teaching classes that are the right size, and if we have a reasonable workload, I would really encourage faculty not to use AI for their teaching. I think that our students are here because they want a relationship with us and with each other. And I really worry a great deal about the ways that AI might interfere with that. But that might not be a popular answer among my colleagues. So I'm represent only myself in that answer.
I was going to say, there are probably things where AI might lend itself. Writing seems like something that is, deeply unique and personal. So, I think there are places where it seems more appropriate and other places where maybe it's not. So, it's a mixed bag there. I get it. Okay, so being an educator, and this may not be your experience, because I would assume that most of your students actively like to write and probably would prefer their own written word over something AI generated. But how do you navigate sort of the potential for use of AI in your students?
So I think I have two answers to that question. And the first one is really what I do in my own class. And then the second one is related to how I work with faculty across the university, how our center works with faculty across the university, since part of our job is to support faculty who use writing in their classroom. So in my own class, I think the way that I have decided to deal with it is, as you sort of saw today, that we have addressed it head on. My colleagues here in the Howe Center have created some online learning modules that I ask students to work their way through about sort of what is AI, how does it work, what are some ethical concerns about it, what are AI writing tools, and then I ask the students to write their own value statements and policies for how they wanted to use AI in the class. And I've been shocked, actually, that they just basically almost 85 to 90% of them said that they were going to pledge not to use it at all. But I think that the point of that is just to say that they're smart and careful. And I think that it's important to just have a conversation with them about what we're doing with these AI writing tools. So that's how I am navigating it myself. But in our center, sort of my colleague, Mandy Olenek, who presented, I think maybe last week, she does a lot of work with faculty on helping them make policies that are clear. One of the things students have said to us is that, whatever their faculty want, they need to have a very clear policy about it and to talk directly to students about it. I think that students are frustrated because they go from class to class and every teacher has a totally different feeling about AI, and that if you don't make a clear policy, then the students don't know what to do. So a lot of our work has been about helping faculty make clear policies, and then also just design really good assignments, because it has been the case that if you're making an assignment that AI could just do for you, then maybe it's time to rethink the assignment. I think that's a lot of what we're talking about now.
Okay, well, this is sort of a related question, and this comes from Jen. She asks, for those of us who do a lot of writing in our work, do you think that there can be a healthy middle ground for utilizing AI in writing? For example, using AI to sort of write tedious tasks or things that like just really bog us down in general. Over, more important projects, maybe focusing your actual writing on that. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think, Jen, I think that is actually probably the future that we can expect, is that there are important and useful ways that AI tools can help us. I think that which tasks AI tools will be useful for depends a lot on the context and the person. So what my students are saying is they are learning to do something for the first time. And so they don't think that they should outsource any of it to AI because they need to learn to do it. But once there's something that you know how to do and you're pretty good at it, then there may be pieces of that that you can very strategically outsource to an AI tool, like maybe organize this or, clean up the grammar or something like that. The other thing that I'm seeing people do is use AI as sort of a thinking partner to come up with ideas if they're stuck, or to organize large amounts of information. And so if you've, got a lot of feedback or you have a million ideas, you might say, give me, organize this into maybe 3 or 4 talking points. I think the challenge is that a lot of people are using AI in a way that is not careful or critical, and you get out of it, what you put into it. And so if you aren't asking the right questions, if you're not careful about what you're doing with what you're getting out, you're going to end up, walking into some really dangerous situations. I think we've seen in the news a lot of what happens when companies are like, yeah, just have AI write the apology for this thing that happened. It's like, it's not a good idea. So, but Jen, I think you're right that there is a middle ground here. And so really the point that I was trying to make today is that I don't think we want to outsource everything to AI. And if we are especially attempting to figure things out or learn or make a connection with the person to whom we're writing, that might not be the best place to use an AI tool.
Excellent. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? I don't think so. I think let's put up your want to dive deeper maybe slide again and give people the opportunity to scan that QR code if they're interested in getting one of the copies of your book. So I have one last question. Like, what do you think is the most important piece of advice you could give somebody who maybe sort of struggles to feel confident in their writing?
I guess, one of the things that I study is what we talk about as threshold concepts, threshold ideas about writing. And I think one of the most important threshold concepts about writing is that writing is hard for everyone, and that all writers always have more to learn. And so if you feel that you struggle more than other people, if you feel that other people must just be having an easy time, I would really just encourage you to recognize that that is not true. I think that there's so many misconceptions in the media and novels and movies and everything else about writing that we've kind of absorbed. And one of them, I had a friend that I talk about in the book who said, I just thought I wasn't a good writer because I'm really slow. And I said, yeah, like being fast has actually nothing whatsoever to do with being a good writer. So I think that I would just encourage people to remember that writing is hard for everyone and that all writers always have more to learn. And that includes a person like me who has a PhD in writing and rhetoric and teaches writing for a living. It's always hard, especially when we are taking up new kinds of writing tasks that we haven't done before.
I think that's really smart. We do have another one that just came in. This is from Donna, and she says that she's starting to see notes at the bottom of certain materials. It says written with the assistance of AI. How do you feel about at least crediting AI when it's used?
Yeah, I wish AI would credit us and make that go both ways. I think that we'll probably have to. For sure, I'm seeing with, applying for federal grants or sending material, like sending something in to be published, that people are being asked to say how they used AI. I think we're going to have to do it. So I think that's probably a no-brainer going forward that we need to do that. And, at this current moment, there's actually no way to prove that someone did or did not use AI. So it's sort of on the honor system because the AI detectors are just kind of terrible. So it really is the honor system. But I think maybe a larger question that we should be thinking about is how much of our own writing and intellectual property AI is sort of hoovering up and then using without giving us credit. I mean, for many of us who have spent a long time trying to publish things in publicly accessible venues, what we learned over the past 2 years is that everything we've ever written was sucked into AI to train it. And so, something that I've written could be popping out, pretty much whole cloth as I wrote it without any attribution to the people that wrote it. So yeah, I think that we do need to say when we use AI, but also we need to recognize that when we're putting things into AI of our own volition, AI now has them, and you might see your ideas showing up elsewhere without any credit to you.
Those are very good points. Let's see. I've got another one here from Carl. He says, your book mentions helping readers reflect on past experiences with writing instruction and replace sort of those damaging ideas with more productive ones. What's the single most common damaging idea about writing or being a writer that you find people carry with them through their education? And is that and what is the productive replacement concept you could offer for a counter?
Well, that is actually the entire book is going through 9 different damaging ideas about writing and then replacements for them. And it's sort of hard for me to say which one is the most damaging because I think every one of us is carrying around a different thing that we find to be damaging to us. And so for some people, I think what's damaging is our very early relationships with writing in school, where we were sort of tracked into different English classes and sort of the slow kids or the fast kids, and that we've never managed to kind of get that idea out of our head. I think for some people, the idea that there are rigid rules that we must abide by is very, very damaging. But there's a bunch of them. I think also the idea that sort of writing is the work of a lone genius is incredibly common in novels and movies, and it's just extremely damaging. Writing is actually very social. None of us, one of the things I quote in the book is Mikhail Bakhtin, who said, none of us is breaking the eternal silence of the universe. And anytime we talk or write, we're using words and language and ideas that we've gotten from other people. Writing is always social, even if we're writing alone. And so I think that part of what I encourage you to do in this book is think of new habits that you could form around your relationship with writing. So for example, getting into a relationship with someone at work or at school who's always willing to read for you, and you do the same for them before you send something out. Or finding a group that you could write with either locally or online. Also just giving yourself time to draft and recognizing that time is fine, that being fast as a writer is not what makes you a good writer. So there's a lot of bad ideas, Carl. I could go on about them for a long time, but the ones in the book, the 9 in the book, are the ones that I really thought maybe, people in general might benefit from thinking through.
Excellent. Let's see. Um, Chris says, I found your presentation very informative. I've always had an interest in woodworking and the wide array of tools you use to woodwork. When I think of AI like woodworking, it is just a tool. Also,
Yes.
the phrase measure twice, cut once, it's good to remember that you need to like check and check again what AI spits out at you. So um, sometimes it's just good to do your own research.
I love that analogy. I
Yeah,
think
you
that
might.
is so smart. And there is a whole chapter in the book about tools. And I think that tools and tool use are something that we don't think a lot about when we think about writing. Um, the tools that you're using matter a lot. And my colleague Tim Lockridge studies the way that people use writing tools. And one of the things that he says is that people get sort of used to using a particular set of tools around writing, and that even if they are not actually working for you, we just get used to them, and so we keep using them. And so part of what I invite you to do in the book is actually take stock of all of the tools that you use for writing. So your screen, your keyboard, that whether you're using Google Docs or Word or something else, all of these things are tools that could be changed, and that changing them might be helpful. And so Dr. Lockridge talks about friction. If you're finding friction in your use of tools for writing, you might want to rethink the tools that you're using. And you're absolutely right that AI is a tool, and probably now like a million tools that do different things. And that we need to make conscious choices about which AI tools we're using and why. And of course, never assume that the tool is just going to get everything right for you. It needs to work for you. You're not working for it. And I think that it's easy to forget that, especially with AI, because it seems like some super competent, brilliant person is just spitting out everything you need. And that's actually not remotely what is happening. So I love the woodworking.
I do too. And I think rethinking the tools that you have and the tools that you use, maybe just out of like routine and habit. I have always felt like I should keep a diary or a journal or a something. And I've gotten to this point in my life where I really wish that I would have. And now I sort of want to start keeping one. And I started like writing in a traditional sort of like journal.
I love
And
that.
it just wasn't working for me. I just like, it just didn't flow like it used to. But when I sat down and just started like onto the blank Google Doc page, it
Yeah.
just came pouring out. So I think, I have to rethink what a diary looks like
Yes.
um, to
And that
facilitate.
you need to let yourself do that. I think that when it comes to writing and writing tools, many of us just have voices in our heads that are just telling us all kinds of things, like a diary should be handwritten.
Yes.
That's not a rule. No one says
Yes.
that. Not true. So write it however you want to write
Right.
it.
I had to like get rid of that idea and like this, it will still be a running log of all of
Yeah.
my happenings and thoughts. It's just different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That like actually makes me feel validated in my
Yes. Good
little,
job.
Google journal. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, we are so happy to have had you here with us today. Just a reminder, if you didn't scan that QR code, to go ahead and do that. Once 50 lucky viewers will get to take home one of those books. And just a reminder that this webinar, a recording of it, will be available on our website later today. That's alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We are so pleased to have you. Please come back and join us again. Again, that's Writing Rediscovered, 9 Concepts to Transform Your Relationship with Writing. Thank you so much for joining us, and love and
Thank you
honor.
for having me. Bye, everyone.